Have you ever just completely brushed off a local superstition? You hear a warning, but you ignore it because you're absolutely certain you know better. Well, in today's Explainer, we're stepping into the dark, incredibly eerie world of Piranha Powerhouse. It's a story that perfectly captures that terrifying clash between urban arrogance and rural tragedy. Trust me, by the end of this, you might just think twice the next time someone tells you to avoid a certain road at night. Let's get right into it.
Well, right off the bat, we're hit with this absolutely chilling line from Ramu Kaka, one of the village elders. He says, "Here we don't cut the electricity goes out on its own." Talk about setting the mood, right? See, when Samir, this young, confident city engineer, shows up to fix the power, he assumes it's just a simple mechanical failure, loose wire, bad fuse, whatever. But Ramu Kaka's words are warning him that this isn't failing infrastructure. It's a living, breathing darkness that literally takes hold of the village.
So, let's talk about where this nightmare actually unfolds. Welcome to Neemkheta. This is a super remote village, completely cut off from modern city life. And get this, for the past 3 days, exactly at sunset, the entire village plunges into absolute darkness. But it's not just the lights going out. A profoundly unnatural silence falls before 7 p.m. Your mobile networks just die instantly, and fear, rather than clocks, dictates the passing of time. It gets so bad that the villagers are forced to huddle together under an old peepal tree every single night just to feel safe.
Okay, so here's where the real friction starts. On one hand, we have Samir's logic. He's educated, he's rational, and he strongly suspects the issue is just loose wires, old transformers, or maybe even just lazy villagers. But pitted against him is Ramu Kaka's reality. He's desperately warning Samir about the old substation, shadows that literally move on their own, and a cursed place they call the Well of Death. We are looking at a classic, dangerous collision here. Modern, scientific arrogance versus ancient, deep-rooted, supernatural fears.
Now picture this. It's later that night in Samir's government quarters. A fierce storm is raging outside, rattling the old windows. Then, the sequence begins. First, Samir hears distinct, wet footsteps slowly pacing his veranda. Second, he peers out into the dark and spots a lone torch swaying mysteriously at the absolute edge of the village. And finally, 3 slow, deliberate knocks echo on his door. The build-up to him turning that handle is absolutely masterful.
So, Samir opens the door, and standing there in the dead of night is Somesh. He's this pale youth with a face so white it looks completely devoid of blood, and he's desperately begging for medicine. He claims his mother is severely sick, breathless, and suffering out in the storm. Now, despite all his earlier skepticism and all of Ramu Kaka's dire warnings, Samir's pity for a desperate son completely overrides his logic. He grabs his first aid kit.
But as soon as they step outside, things get undeniably weird. Just think about the sound for a second. You have Samir wearing these heavy sandals, loudly thudding and splashing through the mud. And then you have Somesh. He's basically gliding forward, producing absolutely 0 footsteps. None. But Samir? He is so stubbornly focused on his medical mission that he completely ignores these massive, unsettling red flags right in front of him.
As they walk further and further away from the safety of the village, Somesh drops this spine-tingling revelation. We don't live there. We are tied there. For years, that well hasn't let us go anywhere. Boom! This is the exact moment the narrative pivots. It's no longer a rescue mission. Samir is being led into a trap, and Somesh is practically spelling it out for him. They aren't going to a home. They're going to a prison.
At this point, the environment itself basically turns against them. It becomes a total sensory nightmare. Tree branches start moving like giant hands, actively trying to block Samir's path. 2 glowing eyes just appear in the dark bushes. And worst of all, Samir starts hearing these disembodied whispers muttering, "Another prey today." He is now entirely isolated, swallowed whole by this supernatural environment.
And then they finally arrive. The cursed house. Right outside, there's this old, fallen electric pole emitting a strange, unnatural blue glow. As Samir steps inside, he isn't greeted by the smell of sickness. He is hit with an unbearable stench of rotting flesh. The interior is covered in thick layers of undisturbed dust and spiderwebs. This isn't a home where someone is fighting a fever. This is a place of deep, absolute decay.
So, Samir approaches the bed, pulls back the white sheet, and, visceral shock. He doesn't see a sick woman. He sees a skull-like face covered in deep wrinkles, ash-colored skin stretched tightly over a skeletal frame, sunken, dry yellow eyes, and horrifyingly long black nails.
he realizes, with absolute dread, that he is standing face to face with a literal corpse. As if that wasn't terrifying enough, the mother's sunken eyes suddenly lock onto Samir. He can actually feel her cold, freezing breath hitting his face, and she rasps out this line. "The time for medicine has passed, son. Now is the time for reckoning." It's brilliant, and it's terrifying. The true, sinister nature of their invitation is totally laid bare. They didn't want a savior with a medical kit. They wanted a target.
So what exactly is going on here? Well, to understand that, we have to look back 2 years. An old electric pole fell outside this exact house. Samesh was electrocuted by the live blue current. His mother desperately tried to save him and tragically died right alongside him. But here is the true horror. While they literally burned, the villagers simply watched from the safety of their homes. They did absolutely nothing to cut the power or help them.
And that tragic backstory leads us directly to the mechanics of this curse. We'll call it the blood bargain. To finally free the mother's tormented soul and restore the stolen electricity to Nimkeda, a living human must touch that strangely glowing pole outside and physically absorb the fatal current. They didn't bring Samir here to fix a broken wire with his engineering degree. They brought him here to be a human sacrifice.
What follows is this incredibly intense moral standoff. Samir makes a desperate plea for his life, arguing that killing an innocent man makes these ghosts just as evil as the villagers who let them die. But Somesh is having none of it. His cold judgment is that the system's silence and inaction while others suffer is a crime in itself. To Somesh, who is completely abandoned by the system that Samir represents, there are no innocents here.
And then, all hell literally breaks loose. The trapped house just devolves into a swirling nightmare of dust and storm. Violent blue lightning flashes outside, wet mud chunks fall from the shaking walls, and Somesh's ice-cold hand reaches directly for Samir's throat. The ghost's eyes turn completely, terrifyingly black. And the mother? She begins to weep, but not out of sadness. She's weeping with this unnatural, predatory hunger. By some absolute miracle, the fierce storm outside violently blows the heavy door open. Samir doesn't hesitate. He seizes the moment, breaks free, and sprints blindly into the muddy darkness. But the once simple village paths have morphed into this confusing labyrinth, twisting back on themselves. He's frantically running, slipping in the mud, desperately trying to escape the terrifying, echoing laughter and screams chasing him through the rain.
But his frantic dash leads him straight into a horrifying dead end. Yama's door, the old well. This isn't just a dried-up water source. It is a deep, black pit wrapped in tangled old electrical wires, literally boiling with thick black smoke instead of water. It ties back perfectly to Ramu Kaka's initial warnings. Samir hasn't outrun the supernatural at all. He has sprinted right into its very heart.
And just when you think it can't get any worse, from that boiling black smoke hears these hypnotic voices. Don't stop. Come to us. Here is great peace. No electricity, no darkness. These seductive, horrifying voices leave Samir completely paralyzed, just teetering at the edge of his doom. The line between finding salvation and succumbing to absolute destruction is totally blurred.
So what does this all mean for us? It leaves us with a pretty heavy question to chew on. Does modern arrogance always end in terror when faced with the ghosts of systemic neglect? Samir's horrific night in Nimkeda is a brutal reminder that when we dismiss the past and blindly ignore the tragic suffering of others, those consequences can and will come back to haunt us in the most terrifying ways imaginable. Hopefully this explainer gave you some deep, albeit chilling insights to think about. Until next time, stay curious, and maybe listen to the locals when they tell you not to go out in the dark.